It's Friday night, and welcome to the Fancaste, episode 13. I'm your lovely host, Brain Muffin, and tonight it's just two of us. So the Lonely Hearts Club Band is playing over New York for Liquid Metal Pro.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have opened my eyes and seen the light. I now see Mother Earth not as a mother, but as a lover.
So, uh, so we're talking about an article that came out this week about loving the Earth, and apparently LMP just came over around it this week, today, in fact.
Yeah.
I saw it earlier this week. I forget how or why. Probably some alt-right crazy nutcase video. Look at my pro. Why don't you give us a few more details there?
Well, so to give credit where credit's due, I know how I found it was through a channel called The Hard Bastard, and he it's kind of like does his own journalistic thing. That's the best way to put it. And I mean, if anybody wants to go check it out, feel free. Puts out some good stuff. He analyzes things, and he's pretty fair for the most part. So basically, I was reading I came across the article today, and I thought it was like some kind of a joke. Apparently, a website called College Fix, which is supposed to be like a right-wingish type of journalistic website, like think like Breitbart type of thing. Posted out an article where it says, "Ecosexual professor spurs movement, have sex with Earth to save it." And of course, they had a little little line here where it's like a little caption where it's like of a girl hugging a tree, where it says Earth as lover, not mother. So they started out talking about how this professor named Elizabeth Stevens filmed a documentary called Ecosexual Love Story. And basically what it was her and her partner. I'm actually reading this off of the College Fix website. So I'm giving credit where credit's due. Where her and a partner apparently licked trees, played with mud, and made love with the environment while naked. So this apparently is now something called ecosexuality. And it's exactly how it sounds.
Oh, sorry. Forgot that I've muted myself. Yeah, here's where I fall with this. So we have whatever they're doing in the mud and hugging trees, literally. I look at it this way. It's the same really, really warped sense of things where, that this belief that one in four women are sexually assaulted on college campuses and things like this. And when we start looking at the actual statistics and it's much lower. And in some ways, people with false allegations are hampering those that really are assaulted. And so I look
Exactly.
at this, and so to me, okay, so how in the world does the Earth, or the spirit of the Earth, or Gaia, or whatever, give consent? So if it can't give consent, are they really lovers, or are they actually rapists?
See, that's the thing with this. I mean, the article, I thought it was a joke, but they actually have links in the article going to other websites. In fact, let me see if I can pull the website that goes a step further with this, because again, you're bringing about the whole thing of consent, and frankly, this has been a debate that's been gone on for a long time whenever it comes to sex. And I'm not going to get into it. I really don't want to put any ideas in people's heads, but
No, I
the
think it's a
whole thing is
legitimate question. I mean, let's treat this as a real. I mean, people will think I'm
okay.
trying to make light of this. I'm really not. It's if we
No,
have this
you're
this
right.
need for an actual consent. I mean, I've Lindsay Green, whatever her name is, Green, who golly, I can see her. I can't remember her first name. She recently took a red pill, but she's done all kinds of videos that said things like, "If you're too drunk to drive, then you're too drunk to consent." And all these times when women are regretting their decisions days later or weeks later, and then they claim retroactively that they were assaulted or raped. You know, that to me is the part that does damage to actual victims. And I'm not trying to make light of this, but seriously, I mean, how can consent be given? And
Well, I think it's about going back to this whole subject matter. I mean, like we're talking again. I don't really like want to get into it too much, but like again, it is a legitimate question. You had like the debate about what is consent in terms of like what sexual behavior is considered appropriate. Again, different states have different laws about it. For those of you that want to keep your sanity, I would recommend just not getting too much into this, not getting developing curiosity because you're gonna go crazy. Believe me, there's some shit out there you don't never want to know about or even have knowledge that exists. Another one is, for example, like consent laws, like in terms of like age consent. You know how one state differs from another. Also, things differ from country to country. Again, it's really a cultural thing. But the one point that you're making, and I definitely want to talk about, is how you have these same people who are saying things like, yeah, if you're drunk with a woman at a bar and the woman is drunk, then that's not, she can't give consent, thus that's rape. Or even my other favorite one that became a bit of an issue. Oh, if she has sex with you but then regrets it, now it's rape. And so it's almost like one of those dumb things where I'm like, okay, so if regret equals rape, then if your mother regretted ever having you, can she still do an abortion?
Yeah. But
I mean, it will be very late term, but still.
right. But on the lighter side of this issue, or idea, or philosophy, or whatever world this is, people that are, to me, this is just more of the mental illness that's going around. We have, when you look at these people in Antifa and all these others groups that they march around, you look at their eyes, man. Their eyes are the dead giveaway that either their eyes jitter about, or there is like, you can tell there's nothing in there. I've seen these, I mean, some of these people are college professors, and the things that come out of their mouth are the dumbest things I've ever heard. And it's all emotion based. And this, the thing about this particular stuff with loving the earth instead of the earth as a lover as opposed to a mother, I have to try to understand it in the realm of the humanists who see, and it's the same people that say men's causing climate change or global warming or global cooling or whatever they want to call it this week, is
Yeah.
man is the evil. So if mankind is the humans is the evil upon the earth, then I'm not sure how this, again, it gets back. I don't see this as a way to remedy things. But yeah, I saw the same stuff. I thought it was a joke. I started looking into it, kind of like what you did, and then I was like, oh my gosh, there are people who actually believe this. I don't even have a word to describe it. I mean, nonsense is way too polite a word, and I don't know have a strong enough, Anyway, but I
Well,
guess to each their own. I guess I don't.
Well, see, here's the thing. Now, I mean, you always worry about with sex. For example, the woman you're with is clean. Are you going to get an STD, crabs? Well, if you're going to be doing with the earth now, you might actually want to be worried about crabs. And I'm not talking about like in certain areas of your body, but I mean, possibly chopping away at certain parts of your body you probably want attached to you.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? Go up to a termite mound or a fire ant a
God.
hill. Yeah. So anyway,
My God, the article like went into it, and I was like, all right, I think this is in like I looked at it, and I'm like, wow, these people really are going with this. And only thing I'll say is, listen, if this is really what you think, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I mean, there's weird folk out there, and honestly, if this is what you really think, coming out in the open and having the world try to accept this is not the way to go about it. Um, I mean, if you want to keep your perversions to yourself, whatever, as long as you're not harming anybody or putting anybody in harm's way or trying to influence people, I guess it's just a band-aid remedy in the meantime. But I mean, don't try to normalize shit like this. Because again, it's people like these people. They start out with something like this, and then eventually they make their way. And again, this is the thing we've talked about before. These people become later on social justice warriors.
well,
And
I think these people are past that. I think that it's like social justice warriors, the beginning of the mental illness, and then eventually you get to Antifa, where you are claiming to be anti-fascist, yet everything you say and do is fascism. And you talk about now we're having electronic burning of books, We have banning of we had banning of
Wait,
speech.
electronic burning?
Well, there's we're having things go down the memory holes and through Google and YouTube. We're having books that they want to ban. A lot of them electronically. You can't can't find it here, can't find it
Are you for
there.
real? Now they're
No,
going
yeah.
up like electronic books. Like, god damn, these people
Well,
just don't know any
a
bounds.
lot of it just well they don't. And then I think when you get so deep into that, then then it's when you get to be. You were saying, look at Metal Pro about something about.
Oh yeah, well basically the whole thing is that it starts out with little things like this, and we make fun of it, we joke around about it, and we say, okay, these people are mentally ill, they need to be locked up, burned, buried, whatever, right? We make jokes about it, but we never actually look at it as anything more than that. The problem is, remember, these people are writing for like magazines, they're writing for publications, they're given airtime. It's like when you go outside and you see like that one crazy bum crackhead on the street, and he's always talking about like, oh, the world's gonna end and everything. We make a joke about him, but then it's kind of turned serious now. Like all of a sudden he appears on TV, like he might actually start influencing people. And the thing is that eventually these people start working for companies and entertainment and stuff like that, and they start dictating what is right and what is wrong. And I don't mean in terms of like what's morally right, what's morally wrong, but rather what is acceptable to say, hear, do, whatever, and what isn't acceptable. And then eventually they make their way into entertainment. And now they start dictating how all the shit goes down. Like, okay, how the characters need to be written, if there's enough minorities in it, if their women look strong, and so on and so forth. Whether so and so forth may be a transsexual the next day, and it just goes from there. It's a domino effect. It's like one of my high school teachers used to tell me, shit never goes uphill; it always rolls downhill, and it always starts with one like little innocent thing, and then it just gets into a complete mess.
Yep, and I agree, and that's yeah. I mean, you look back, people will say it's like people didn't pay attention until it got to be really, really bizarre. But you can find this kind of stuff. I remember talking back in the '90s when I worked in the library. I knew people that were in the postmodern society, and I would listen to things they were saying. I'm like, that doesn't even logically flow. And they were the people that were protesting the Vietnam War. And here they're in their 40s or early 50s, 20 years later, 30, 25 years later, and but they're the professors, and so they start. I remember back in the '90s too. There was talk of um, male lesbians. The whole concept that you could,
What?
right? If it was just an accident of genes that you were male, but otherwise you had been a lesbian. And now we have people that are transgender all over the place, who are male and want to become women and all this other stuff, or cross dress. But 20 years ago, 25, almost 25 years ago, there was the beginnings of those ideas were already being fostered. So yeah, it's pretty bizarre, and
And
it,
it makes its way to our entertainment.
yeah, at some point it'll fold in on itself, I guess, but who knows. Episode 88 WCBS. So hopefully
It's a good
everybody
story.
has listened to it. If you go over there now, you will see in the description the timeline that I created, although apparently one of the returns got messed up when Jeff cut and pasted it. Or look at my pinned comment. And you are welcome for those fans who insist on having that. It's nice to skip around. They stayed a little more on topic this week, so it was easier to kind of break that up. Last week they were driving me nuts. I finally had to just give up trying to. It was sometimes every 15 seconds, and I got tired of doing that. So basically, I do that as I listen, and then I decide, oh, wait a minute, this is really another topic. I go back to where they started. I find the time, I put it in, I give it a stupid title. The other thing that I put in last week that no one seems to have picked up is every time you see it mentioned and a time, that's when they talk about
Mhm.
me. So because I did it, I put it in. I did not do it this week, and I came up about 4 times. So anyway, so Star Wars news. There was a lot of Star Wars news. They talked about Star Wars a couple different times for different things. So let's go. I'm going to go backwards sort of on my list here.
That's fine.
And let's go with the Last Jedi reveal. So Ryan Johnson, I think that's his name. He confirmed. Spoiler alert: the Last Jedi is Luke. Now,
No shit.
right. So if you're only half paying attention, you probably should have already known that. especially with Luke saying it's time for the Jedi to come to an end. I would actually argue that he's technically not a full Jedi. But because he was the only one, right? So by the time he has his confrontation with Vader, um, Yoda's gone, Obi-Wan is gone, maybe the Force Ghost he gets taught. I don't know. There's a lot of philosophy he didn't get introduced to that we saw in the prequels. But yeah, I don't know if anybody was surprised with that. There was a lot of discussion as to why. I think Dion kind of said this backwards when he said, he said you have faith in your movie. I was like, no, yeah, I think you would reveal this if you didn't have faith in your movie. I think is what he meant to say. Because his comments seem to go that way. You know, I don't really fully know what to make of this other than to end the speculation and all of the thousands of videos of fan theories on that one statement. And whether Jedi was plural or singular or anything like that. And, maybe if I give them the benefit of the doubt, I would say this is, there's other reveals in here that they felt that this one was a minor point, and we're just going to kind of end the speculation and be done with it. On the flip side, I'm pretty much like, yeah, I think this movie's going to be horrible. I have zero faith in its ability to be good, and they're just kind of getting stuff out of the way.
I mean, with the whole thing with Star Wars, and I think you can say this is probably something that's a result of the trilogy, not so the original trilogy, but maybe the prequels. Is that now anytime that Star Wars is essentially coming back to theaters, with new movies or stuff like that, it has to be a trilogy. Remember, I know this has been said enough times already. The original Star Wars wasn't made with the intention of having a sequel or a trilogy or anything like that. Basically, it was kind of like, they picked, Lucas and the bunch. Basically, they kind of had an idea of what they were doing, while simultaneously, I guess the right way of saying it would be not planning for it. Like, they didn't plan to do, make it this big thing that it became. Then later, of course, Lucas, when he came out with the prequels, he had a whole thing envisioned, and for better or for worse, the prequels are there. Ultimately, I will admit the first one sucks. The second one is, I don't know, mildly better, I guess. Third one, of course, we can all unanimously agree we enjoyed or like it or think it's the best one of the three. And then it's like, once Disney got a hold of it, him and them and Jar Jar and Kathleen Kennedy, they all decided, all right, we're going to imitate what Lucas did before. And we're going to create another trilogy. And based on the fact that it's a trilogy, it's going to sell. Like, we don't have to do anything else other than announce a trilogy, put in a new character, bring some older characters back. It's kind of like pass the torch. So kind of like the whole nostalgia factor of it, that's going to bring asses in seats. And of course, we're going to make it our product now by having our selected individual, in this case, Davy Ridley. I'm going back to that. And unfortunately, episode 7, a lot, people who are initially defended it, now they're going back on it. You have people who are very consistent about it sucking, and Class Bullshitters is definitely one of them. They have made their peace with that very clear. Then Rogue One, you've mentioned, comes off as a comedy to you. So,
no, well,
and then
hold on, I find it funny. It's
okay,
not,
well, you find it funny.
It's not that it's okay, technically you're right.
Okay,
I do find it as a comedy, although it's not technically a comedy, but it is freaking funny because it wants to be taken so seriously. And the thing is, too, there are still people defending TFA, and
right.
This gets into my point that I've made previously about groupthink here, where, the next piece of all this Star Wars news is Episode 8 Episode 9 rather, losing its director already.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
So now some people are saying too, well, there are at least 3 times now we've had this. Now, technically, Rogue One had 3 directors. There was a director, I forget who it was, that was announced at first, but he didn't even make the pre-cut. Then Gareth Edwards came in, gave a movie. The execs freaked out. They hired someone else to reshoot 40+% of it. Now we've had the Han Solo movie. The directors get fired. Ron Howard comes in. Now we have episode 9. Kathleen didn't like and let's not forget Jar Jar Abrams here. He's easy to forget that he's not directing, but he's still producing well, I don't think he produced Rogue One, and that might be why Rogue One was so much better. But his fingers are all over this too, and it's the two of them.
Kind of like with DC and Snyder.
Right, and yeah, because Wonder Woman was written by Snyder like years ago. That script has been floating around.
Yeah,
but
you can tell.
Justice League as well. There's these people on YouTube who are afraid of Disney. Now, they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and it might be easy for us with our 110 to say blah, 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 and people don't care. But they want to get invited to the parties. They want to get to the content, and they don't want to be shut down or whatever, which is sad because none of them are giving their true, I don't believe they're giving their true opinions, or they pretend to like stuff. But what's interesting is people that used to support TFA quite a bit are starting to at least admit, even if they still say it's good, they're at least admitting it's a rehash of A New Hope. And Rogue One, they keep saying it was something different. Rogue One was nothing different. Rogue One was essentially, if you want to boil it down, was the chase portion of Empire done on land, and the trench run. The whole battle at the end is essentially one big trench run. And
right.
This is why they were able to use stuff from A New Hope, redigitize it, remaster some pieces. We're setting up for our attack run and all this stuff because, it ends up being Spaceballs at the end. I mean, it really is Spaceballs at the end. And you have this planet with a shield around the whole planet and one place that you can go in, and they have to take it out. But the reason why they are able to reuse that footage and all that stuff is because they really were just taking things from the old movies. And again, it was fan service. Now, I had somebody arguing with me on YouTube that Rogue One had more fan service than Force Awakens, and I'm like, there is no possible way for you to defend that. I just dropped the conversation because I was just like,
well, okay, like I need to understand this because again, myself, I have not watched Force Awakens and I've not watched Rogue One, but I will say this much: if you want to talk about fan service, to me, knowing the fact that Han Solo, Leia, Chewbacca are in The Force Awakens, to me sounds like more fan service in Rogue One. Because in Rogue One, yeah, you had Vader, but he wasn't, like the whole thing was when they promoted it, it sounded more like they were trying to get this new cast, like they were trying to get them the spotlight. And of course, The Force Awakens had it with Daisy Ridley. But at the same time, they were quick to constantly point out, or at least from what I gathered, you even saw it in the promotionals, like the poster and everything. Like you saw how they still showed Han's face, Leia's face, Chewbacca. Like there was merchandise for it. So I'm like, would really, like, again, me, someone who's really more of an outsider looking in, would I really believe that Rogue One is the fan service just because it has Vader? I'm like, yeah, you probably may have one of the most iconic characters in the series, period. But then you have another 3, and then on top of that, you even end the movie with Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and then he's not in it until the very end. Well, I'll tell you, Rogue One. R2 and D2 and C-3PO went it for like 4 seconds. They have the Uncanny Valley Leia at the end. We get the Vader. We get Tarkin. And part of that, all the things that they had to do digitally is because they were making this, a prequel movie. And
yeah, they had to connect it back to the original series.
So it ends essentially, well, people want to argue that Rogue One ends minutes before A New Hope opens, which I think is complete and utter baloney. When you listen to Vader's, especially when he's talking to that twerp that's walking beside him, I don't even know what the guy's rank is, a lieutenant or something. He says that he's traced the rebel spies to her, and she's his only link and to them. Well, he doesn't know anything about who's in that ship when it takes off, when it comes out of the bigger ship. I mean, it's like a Russian egg doll here, where here's a big ship, and oh, surprise, there's this other ship inside of it. What would have been better is Vader capturing some of the team. If the team would have been involved with Leia on Yavin or wherever they are, and then or maybe somewhere else, maybe on Dantooine or something, which is mentioned in A New Hope.
Right.
And he captures a couple of them and tortures them and finds out who gave them the information. How did you find out? Even if you keep the whole heist part of it and them stealing the plans, well, how'd you find out it was here? Well, you could have some spy telling Leia or getting a message to Leia about where this stuff is, and forget Jyn Erso and her father and all that other garbage. This is Kathleen Kennedy trying to recreate Star Wars for girls by making it all about girls, even though it's not necessary. There were a lot of girls that played. I mean, just go to a Star Wars convention and see how many women are dressed up as Slave Leia. I'll leave it at that, and I guarantee you more than half of them are. Whether they should be or not, that's a whole different discussion. But so if they do that, and she talks, even if it's the same gang of useless characters, she sends them off. Some of them get captured. We have a torture scene similar to what we have in The Force Awakens with Darth Emo and Rey. We have something because in A New Hope, Vader uses a machine with drugs and all that stuff, and he still can't break Leia. Well, let's say he does this, especially if it's just on the run, and he gets a name, and he's able to connect Leia's Organa to that ship, and that ship is in the battle. Then if you say, hey, he says, Captain, open fire on that ship, it jumps to let's say it jumps into light speed. We have the kind of the thing that we do, and then let's just say it just jumps to light speed, and maybe we have the stupid thing at the end. What's on that tape? It's Hope. And perhaps Vader pulls. Let's say on the bridge we have one of the survivors still there, and he looks deep into their eyes, doesn't say anything, drops them, and says, "Set course for Tatooine." And then now you have a movie that leads into A New Hope. Right now, Rogue One does not do that because it's like now there's more questions. How does he know where to go? How does he chase them through hyperspace? All that nonsense. That kind of stuff we don't have. Or you could have an Imperial spy planning a device or something like that. Just show them planning a tracking device on the ship so they can catch them. And that's another way to do it. Captain is, and that's again a new callback to A New Hope because they put a tracking device on the Millennium Falcon. It goes to hyperspace, and it's not until they're out of hyperspace that they get the signal. Those types of things would tie the movies together a lot better. And so when these fan service movies are made, and this is what I mean by fan service and TFA. So Force Awakens, there's a great video that shows shot per shot stuff from A New Hope and Empire that is in that. You have Easter eggs in almost every stinking scene, and
I think I've seen that video before.
Right. And then Rogue One is just this. It's horrible. I mean, I'm sorry, Jeff, but Rogue One is it's a god awful mess.
Hey, it's fair. Disagreeing is not a bad thing necessarily. If anything, it's what stirs the conversation.
Well, hey, this is why people won't talk to me about Wonder Woman, because people who like the movie within 5 minutes don't like it anymore after they talk to me. And I don't badmouth it. I just point out certain things that they're missing, and they start connecting the dots, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're right."
Well, I mean, part of it. I'm not trying to knock you by saying this, but it's you yourself being an older person, you've had the wisdom, the experience. You've seen these things. Again, when you're talking, when we had the whole thing about the tree conversation, or not to get back to that, but you was talking to me about things that obviously I was not around for. So you're giving me an insight to, how just deep this really goes. Right. And, someone like myself, I wasn't part of that time period. I wasn't part of that. So I wouldn't have a first-hand account. Any information is going to be more like a second-hand, third person, whatever. So it's good to get an input from somebody sometimes who's been around longer, who has seen these things, who picks up on the little things, and even was there to see the originals, or at least experience them before it became the whole digital age now.
Right.
What it's like. For example, a lot of movies that my parents they always keep telling me how they grew up with these movies and everything. Obviously, if I watch them now because of the age we live in, I might not think much about them because they're an old grainy quality. Acting was a little different back then, but you can tell there was a lot of heart behind it when you look at it.
Right.
Like they'll explain it to me, and I'll be like, "Oh, that you're actually right about this."
Right.
But then, and it's not just me; it's a lot of other people who are that way. So that's one of the reasons why I can't like watch Wonder Woman, because it's like it just doesn't appeal to me. Like it really is kind of like the hive mind thing, like where people are like, "Oh, why are you afraid of watching a movie about a woman?" And it's like, no, I've been watching movies about women before. I played video games with female protagonists.
Yeah.
Not that I'm afraid of women or sexy women or any type of women. Period. It's that the movie, who is it exactly trying to appeal to? Same thing with Star Wars. Like if they're trying to sell me, like for example, with the prequels, you can tell there was a lot of hype behind it. They had a lot of faith in everything. I mean, yeah, granted, if you're one of the believers of the original Darth Jar Jar theory, that was a fan backlash against the Jar Jar character. I mean, the rest of the trailers and everything made the movie look so interesting. Like even the way they kind of like hid certain things about the movie until you actually went to see the movie in theaters. Whether you were left disappointed or not, you found something to enjoy about the movies. Again, there are things I enjoyed about the first movie. What was it? The Phantom Menace. Like the Darth Maul fight. Like if you can hate everything else, but that Darth Maul fight was like most badass things out there.
Right. Highly choreographed, but basically what's part of it, it needed to be highly choreographed because you have essentially the Jedi at their height.
Exactly.
Of there's been peace in the galaxy for 1,000 years or something. So you've had generation upon generation upon generation of Jedi who've been able to train and teach each other and find secrets. You have, even in the second one, you have when Qui-Gon essentially comes back to Yoda. He speaks, you don't actually see him, but you have this thing, he's found out how to come back. And so Yoda and Obi-Wan prepare, part of why they're in isolation for so long is preparing to become a Force ghost fairly quickly. And going through all the mental pieces, that's why they appear readily when they die. And so you should see that at their most ornate and their most stylized, we'll say, fighting, because it's not I look at a lot of the martial arts, and when you look at a martial arts that is basically derived directly from fighting, now whether it's an MMA fight or street fight type thing, basically where the idea is to either get distance on your opponents and flee, or put your opponents down very quickly, not sit there and tap on them for 10 rounds. I mean, you just want them down and gone and out of your hair, perhaps literally, as quickly as possible. And then you start looking at somewhere like Kung Fu kind of starts that way, and then it gets more and more elaborate. And you've got these katas that are very intricate and lots of parts, and they look beautiful. But in a fight, they're almost useless. And that's basically what I see with to me. I didn't mind the highly choreographed, over-stylized, because this is the Jedi about to fall because of their hubris. They think they know everything. They think they know better. They think they are better. And they are easily manipulated into a corner to look like the bad guys. And because of that oversight. And, it's... this is part of this groupthink, and we have this notion that you can't criticize. If you criticize Force Awakens or Wonder Woman or Rogue One, you must be a sexist. No, I really like the Terminator franchise. Well, the first two movies. The third one's okay, and then from then it gets worse. But to me, one of the big problems with T3 is no Sarah Connor. You don't have the strong female protagonist anymore. You have, is it Claire Danes that plays the doctor that he's chasing? You see the budding of her leadership for later, but that's all it is. But you don't have a strong female lead in that movie, and I think that's one of the big things that's missing from it.
Sorry to cut you off, but something I wanted to bring up actually, now that we're talking about Star Wars and fan service, and it made me want to think about researching with upcoming Comic-Con here in New York City. Now, as much as I would like to get an autograph from Mark Hamill, not because of Star Wars necessarily. I mean, yeah, that's a big part of it, but he's my absolute favorite Joker. You know, from the animated series, his voice is just he lives that character. And you know, you want to talk about iconic characters? He has two: Luke Skywalker, Joker. I'm pretty sure he's done other things too. I think also was in Jay and Silent Bob. I think as a cameo, very funny one at that. I believe. I mean, he's been all over. He's done different things. But for me, those are the two that stand out the most. So I went to check and see, okay, well, what are the autographs and the scheduling for them? So you have not only him, but also Felicity Jones showing up that day. At that event. Now, what's interesting is that Mark Hamill is showing up all 4 days, which is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Felicity Jones is only showing up one. I don't know if that may be related to maybe they have some type of scheduling thing going on or whatever the case. But what is interesting to note is what are the prices, and this is how I know I'm not getting an autograph, for autographs as well as photo ops. You want to hear them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Felicity Jones, toss me a number. What do you think an autograph fee would be? Or even a photo op? What do you think?
So this is something where you have to either have something or buy a picture of her in order for her to autograph?
I'm guessing it's just the fee for an autograph. They don't really specify.
So I'm going to assume she's full of herself and say it's $75.
Okay. See, I would have agreed with you. Unfortunately, according to this, her autograph fee is $200.
Whoa. She is full of herself. And
her photo op basically the same price. Now you can also buy these apparently. You can pre-order these apparently now at Comic-Con. I don't know how that works. I'm not even gonna bother with that. All right, so let's look at the man himself. Let's look at the man who basically might have been a big part of inspiration for Star Wars for a lot of us. Not just Star Wars, but for me also the animated series. So we have Mr. Mark Hamill himself, available all 3 days by the way. Actually, autograph table 1. A pretty big deal. I know it sounds minor, but table 1. Damn. Let's see. What was Felicity Jones's table number? Almost tempted to find table 4. That's what you know what? I might go that day and take a look at the lines and see what they're like.
Right.
And then come back and compare it if I'm able to. But I got to be there at the specific times to see it. All right. So Mark Hamill. Take a guess. Autograph or solo photo op, whatever.
All right, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to say, okay, $75 for him then.
No, again, you're wrong by a lot. By a third, basically. $295 for an autograph fee and $250 for a solo photo op.
Well, you guys are rich up in New York, I guess. Come to Comic Expo, man. It's only $40 for the famous people.
I mean, this is basically what's happened to Comic-Con and what happens when things. What's basically it's a problem I've been having with New York City Comic Con and how it's getting worse. I'll rant about it maybe another time. Maybe I'll do a video on just put on my channel. We can rant about it, and I'll tell you what I think are the problems with it now.
Well, how much does it cost for an entry ticket? A 1 day ticket.
Well, here's the thing: we no longer have the 3 or 4 day passes, which used to be very convenient.
Right.
They used to go for I think 3 day was around $90 or $100, and I think 4 day was $110, $120.
Right.
And it's a standard day ticket. Thursdays, I believe, is $40. I think Fridays are $50. Friday, Saturday, Sunday are $50 each. So imagine you're going to, because again, I can only assume these lines are going to be long and people will pay the money for it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and
$300. I mean, I don't care who that autograph is from. That's hard for me to even fathom spending that kind of money on an autograph.
Well, I still find it hilarious that Felicity Jones is $200, considering I'm okay, this would probably be the closest I know about you ever doing anything comic book or sci-fi related.
Yeah.
So coming in at $200.
Well, how much is the con pocketing? That would be a big question. I bet you they're getting at least half of it.
Oh, they've got to be getting a good chunk of it. I really have no idea.
But yeah, at Comic Expo here in Cincinnati, they're usually 30. Some are as high as 50, but they're usually $30 to $50 for and depending on the line. I mean, a couple of years ago, my daughter and I went, and she got one of the Rangers. I forget Tommy. I forget the actor's name, David something. Yes, anyway. And next to us,
He's
a couple,
David Frank.
yeah. So
Yeah,
a
I met
couple
him.
booths
Pretty cool.
over. So I mean, he like interviewed her because he was doing stuff for his YouTube show, and he got his camera out and talked to her, and he talked to me, and you know, ran it when he came back from his break, and there were probably about 20 some of us in line because it was like on a Sunday we were there in the afternoon, so there's not a whole lot of people. And he ran up and down, kind of got the energy of the crowd going, you know. Well, a couple
Yeah, he
booths
does that.
over, right? A couple booths over was John Rhys Davies. And I swear, now he had maybe 8 or 9 people in line, which wasn't bad. And I don't know what all they talked about, but I noticed while I was in line at the other place that this couple went up to him. They had something to show him. I don't know what it was. I would have loved to have known. And he talked to them for 20 minutes. Well, that's going to be worth $50, you know, if you get an autograph
Yeah.
from him. And I don't remember what he was charging, but I remember several years ago I went and what's her name from Star Trek Next Generation, the counselor. Deanna Troi was the character's name, and now I'm blanking on the actress's name, who I think is just an absolute lunatic. Nobody got in line. We were there on Saturday afternoon, and nobody got in her line at all. And Billy Boyd was there, had a bunch of people in his line. The original Blue Ranger was there. That was the first one that my daughter got. We got some pictures with him. You know, and they get the picture and they take a photo. And then you had like Henry Winkler, who was just trying to leave, and people were still asking for autographs, and he signed him. Now Lou Ferrigno didn't, and he's apparently notorious for not really doing anything. But he also looked like he was in pain. But you know, Henry Winkler walked by me. I gave him the ace, like the Fonz, and I got a couple pictures of him doing autographs of people outside of his booth. But the con has got to be, you know, if the price of the tickets is still, you know, even for for 3 days it's $150. I go to MatsuriCon in Columbus, which isn't nearly as big, and it's, you know, I think at the door it's $50 or $60 for a 3-day pass. So I can kind of see that. And and they probably have, depending on the panels and stuff, they probably noticed the trend where people were only coming 1 or 2 days, and so maybe that's part of why they. But Comic-Con has also gotten so big; it's almost like too big for its own good. They've kind of gotten full of themselves because they've got too many of them. That's
definitely.
You know, I unless I'm going to get 10 minutes with Mark Hamill, I really have a hard time spending $300 for a photo. Even if it says to my best friend Brian Lake, you know, or something like that, it's highly personalized.
I don't know. He better like kiss me on the lips or something for that
you
price.
know, and that may be part of it too. If you're spending $250 on an autograph that's not personalized, because that's the other thing too, is some people are probably reselling these things. And so at a lot of conventions nowadays, they ask you, there's a person sitting beside them that will ask you to spell your name, and they will make sure that it's because when it's personalized, it's not worth nearly as much.
Yeah, it's worth better, basically.
Right.
Like, you got to find someone else who shares your name for them to say, look, I got this.
Unless you become famous or something, and then someone will want that. But yeah, that's just incredible. And you know, I think Joel went to Comic-Con, was it last year, and he even made a comment about he didn't like it. So anyway, but are there any more Star Wars topics we want to talk about? Because I'm just about sick of talking about Star Wars. I will say this, Mr. Green, I disagree. I think the problem is there's too much Star Wars. Part of this fatigue that's set in is we get a Star Wars movie or Star Wars related movie every year. I personally don't think it helps that we have all this turmoil on the directorship, because it tells me that Kathleen and Jar Jar are making a mistake at whom they hire, because this, you know, creative differences nonsense should be known before you hire somebody. So it should be part of the interview process if they are. I think they're just getting the hot names, and then they're realizing their mistake later. So I did see some videos on this with Colin Trevorrow being dismissed, and people are saying how good it is, and they're saying that the King and the guys that were doing the Solo movie, oh, this is great. I didn't like him anyway. It's again this group think. If
Yes,
one of
you're
these,
justifying your thought process.
right, if one of these big channels had if they had the balls really to
The
say,
way,
you know
well,
what,
say what it is.
here's my real opinion. This is horrible news. Even if these directors are not good for what's needed, people are saying, oh, they're not fans. Look, Abrams supposedly is a fan of Star Wars, and he got zero right about Star Wars and The Force Awakens. He got zero right about Star Trek, even though they made, and unfortunately these movies have made a crap ton of money. And that's the only thing he's done right, is got butts and seats, and that's really all that counts now, right? None of these movies were really grandiose and great visions of anything, but anyway. So, but if one of these these channels with 250,000 subscribers said, here's why it's bad, it means bad decisions are being made up front. And now, granted, they are at least Kathleen and Jar Jar are somewhat admitting their mistakes, but they always make it sound like the problem is with the director. And the problem here is leadership. As a former manager, I'm going to tell you the problem here is leadership, and Kathleen Kennedy doesn't have any. She doesn't have a vision of what she wants to do other than make Star Wars accessible to everybody. So diversity is the only thing that counts. Well, Star Wars was accessible to everybody before you started screwing things up. And,
Exactly.
And this whole diversity by skin tone and gender alone is exactly why James got fired from Google when he brought it up, because that's not real diversity. That is pandering, and it's insulting, and it's vulgar, and I think this is really going to blow up in their face. And it may take all three movies. It may take really, horrible things to happen to Star Wars, unfortunately, for people to red pill and wake up that this is not a good idea. And Disney is banking on all the, Kathleen and Disney and Jar, all of them are banking on this nostalgia and hatred for the prequels, which is drummed up years after the fact. And it's sad that my favorite franchise of all time is going through this. To kind of bounce off what you were saying, I think George had an overall arcing idea, because he also had this massive space battle. This is why we get some of this stuff repeated in Jedi, because by Jedi he was able to do a lot of the stuff he wanted to do in the first movie. He had a movie that was like 5 hours long or more, but because there was no guarantee that there was going to be a sequel, because Hollywood didn't like doing sequels back then, you get a complete movie from the start.
Exactly.
Don't forget that Fox almost shut him down. He was out of money, over budget, and had a couple more weeks of post stuff to do. He put some stuff together. He showed Spielberg and several others. They went to Fox and said, "You've got to let him finish. It's going to be that good." But even then,
you want to talk about having faith. There you go.
Well, and apparently he even spliced in World War II footage of fighters, or one footage of fighters doing stuff, probably World War II, and the kind of banks and angles that he wanted to do with his models. And still, his cut of the movie was not that good. It had horrible pacing, and it got re-edited, and it was much better. But I really believe if he hadn't started monkeying around with the originals, and the versions you now get on DVD and Blu-ray are these abominations, and then gave us a prequels. Again, I think if he would have had people do it with him, as like he did for Empire and Return of the Jedi, this is the beginning of this yes men nonsense. He didn't have anybody that said no. We got horrible prequels. He leaves. Kathleen has not been set up to take over, yet she does anyway. She has nobody that will say no. And now we're getting essentially another series that's worse than the prequels, because everybody's afraid to have a different opinion.
Because they know what they need.
Huh?
You know what they need? They need a strong alpha male to take leadership.
Yeah.
That's some bullshit.
Well,
kick her out.
Look at who all the directors are. These little whiny, hiney beta males. And then apparently if they express a different opinion, well, what happens? They're gone. Gareth had a too violent a war movie, so he didn't get fully dismissed, but we replaced half his movie. Now we've had, is it Howard and King? I always forget their names, but they apparently probably expressed a different of opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was something about how hot the coffee should be. I bet you this thing had nothing to do with the stupid movie. And now we've got Colin Trevorrow fired before they really start. And the apologists are already out. Well, they've already brought in other writers. They brought in. Why is the director writing the movie anyway? You know, didn't we learn from the prequels that written and directed by the same person is not necessarily good?
Exactly.
So, but hey, for the Solo movie, we can have an acting coach come in 2/3 the way through shooting because, that's normal. Shoot me now. The only other thing I have about Star Wars, and I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, is the Millennium Falcon being painted blue and white. Lando's going to own it. I don't have a problem with that, especially if they leave it back in that time. So we're talking in the days of the Old Republic.
Okay.
I think. See, he's about 40 in A New Hope. So if he was in his 20s, because he actually was in the. Maybe that's too far. That's too long. Maybe it's going to be in between. The Empire is going to exist because I think Solo was supposed to be in the Imperial Navy. That's why he wears the pants that blue with the red stripe. Granted, it's been a long time since I've read the Solo books, and of course Disney dumped all that stuff anyway. But I don't have a problem if in the entire movie Lando has the Millennium Falcon, and it ends with Han, similar to the third book similar to one of the books where it's Han tells Chewie, "Hey, I heard about a card game, and that's we're going to." I don't have a problem with that. I do agree with Jeff if they do some kind of nonsense where it starts with Lando getting it, he gets the Millennium Falcon, and they do certain things, and it ends with him hiding out on Tatooine or something. Basically at the beginning of A New Hope, I won't like that.
No, I hear you.
Because even the Han Solo books that I read back in the 80s, from what I remember, it ends with something like, him saying to Chewie, "Hey, I hear that Jabba the Hutt has a big job that needs to be done," or something like that. So it doesn't even have his problem with the spice run where he gets boarded and has to dump it and gets him in trouble with Jabba the Hutt. It's kind of in between. So there's probably several years between the end of that book and the beginning of A New Hope. So, and I think, if I remember correctly, the Lando books end somewhat similarly, where he still has the Millennium Falcon, but he's going to the game where he's going to lose it.
No. All right, we'll see what happens with this. Only time will tell.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I am fatigued but I'm fatigued not just from Star Wars. I'm fatigued from all the freaking Marvel movies, and it's just I just want. Can I go back to caring about movies every 2 or 3 years? I don't really have the energy for every 3 months. Oh, I want to see that movie. Oh, I want to see that because I hate crowds, and I hate going to movies, and then I half the time forget about them anyway. So.
Well, the whole thing about the movie experience, I remember before, I was still a kid at the time. I forgot which movie it was. I know I wasn't watching a terrible movie, but I was a kid, and one thing they discuss in today's episode is kids and what they like. Kids are very easy to appeal to. They'll like almost anything. So you can produce absolute garbage, and they'll probably just say, "Hey, they love it. It's their favorite thing."
Right.
So I think it must have been like Batman 2 or the first American version of Godzilla. One of those two movies I remember going. But I remember when I went to the theaters, like you said, it felt more like a movie experience. Like you saw people there, you were all gathered as a crowd, you had emotional reactions, you sympathized with the character, you hated the character, whatever.
Right.
As a kid, I remember watching a lot of, for example, I was big on Godzilla. I used to grow up watching movies. I like dinosaurs. I remember watching that shit piece that was the American version. But I remember crying at the end watching Godzilla die. It was like that whole movie experience of seeing a character you like die or something like that. And I don't get that anymore from a lot of movies. Like I think the last movie that I mean I did get it from Guardians, but especially from Logan. But even then, it feels like the movie experience isn't what it used to be. And again, it's all because of this fatigue nonsense that it's now everything has to be a blockbuster. Like, why are we having blockbusters in February? Why are we having blockbusters in March? Why are we having blockbusters in May? Why are we having them in June? Why are we having them in July? And when you start now saying these things out loud to yourself, you're realizing, holy shit, there's just too many movies out there to keep up with. Like, now I have to go watch this, and oh, now my friends want to go see this. Well, I don't have enough time to go see this. I have to do this on this Friday, particular day. This is like here in New York City, March is still pretty much winter for the first like 2/3 of the month. So there's still some. I mean, like February is still like a cold month. So sometimes you don't even feel like going outside at all. So it's this fatigue thing, and not just with that franchise, but almost all these movies. It's like at one point, I mean, are we already in the fatigue? Like for yourself, you're saying you're already in the fatigue. Am I in the fatigue? I really can't say for certain because there's still things that I want to see, like I'm still hyped for. But at the same time, I feel like a certain like something's almost kind of like holding me back. Like, do I really want to see this, or is it just the hype? Like, is the hype getting me excited for it? Is it really going to be a good movie? And it's not like before where it was like I really adamantly had to see the movie. Even with the prequels, it was like that. Like I have to adamantly see this in theaters. Like I'm not gonna wait for the VHS. I'm not gonna wait for it to show on cable TV. I have to go see it now. And this was still during the time when movies still competed with one another. You used to have movies coming out or in theaters for long times, for months even at one point. Competing against one another. So it wasn't like there wasn't competition before. It's just that it wasn't oversaturated like it is now. And I don't know. I mean, do you feel like this fatigue thing? Do you think it's already settled in for people? Do you think it's going to settle? What is your take on this?
Um, I think it's a combination, and I think the two biggest crowds are there are people where it's like me who had settled in like a year ago. We don't see all
Right.
the movies. We see the bigger ones. I saw Winter Soldier, I don't know, a year after it was out. I tried to watch it when my son was watching it. He bought it on, he rented it on DVD, I don't know, a few months after it came out, whenever that was first available. And, I didn't watch Batman versus Superman because I thought it looked stupid. And then everybody said they hated it. And probably in the last several months, I've watched all these movies. And even with Wonder Woman, my wife and I went, I think it was in the second week of release. I don't think there were 12 people in the theater. So how it's doing so many sales is beyond me because so many people tell me they see it and there's nobody in the theaters. Well, when it was going on. And you're right. We used to have just a handful of blockbusters. So you would get two or three, maybe on a good summer, four blockbusters. And they would come out, early May is usually when the Star Wars movies come out, when they were scheduled. I'm talking, okay, back when I was well, those were all done by the time I was in my 20s. But, we had Star Wars, we had Indiana Jones in the off years, we had Star Trek movies that came out, and they rarely competed head to head. And that was usually on purpose. And then you would have, let's say at the beginning of the year, you might have a couple that came out, because that's when Oscars and stuff would start to go out.
Right.
But then you'd start the summer movie season. You'd get May. So like May, June, July, and August. You'd usually have one, maybe two in a really incredible year. But it was rare that you would get 6 or 7 in one summer. And part of it too is I lived on the military base for a lot of this stuff, and from '79 until '86, I lived on an army base somewhere. So if we saw what we call going on the economy to see a movie, it would be when things were going on. Otherwise, we'd see it in the base theater. It could be months afterwards. And when I lived in Germany, it could be 6 months. Like I saw Back to the Future, although that one was only a couple months after it was out, because that was in '85. But that would have been like right before school started, as opposed to whenever it came out in the summer. So my time scales are a little bit jaded. But when I lived in Maryland, I went with a friend of mine. We went to Hagerstown Mall and saw Tron, and during the summertime, and he and I loved that. We were both computer nerds, and we loved that movie. And most people didn't get it. It's like there's a lot of subtleties in that movie that if you don't understand what computer terms are, they go right over your head, and you don't realize how deep some of that stuff can be. But now we get more and more blockbusters, and they do compete with one another. And George Lucas said this a couple of years. I got to get this like a clip of this and just like play it every time someone talks about something. But in his interview with Charlie Rose, and I think that was before The Force Awakens came out, but I can't remember if he had seen it yet or not. But he's talking about if it's not a sequel or a reboot, Hollywood isn't interested. And that's exactly what we're getting. And even in the Marvel movies, it's like you have the overall flow of the arc going with Captain America and the Avengers and stuff. But you're getting the same base story over and over again. It's like they have 4 stories and they shuffle them around. The Captain America movies to me I can't tell one from another really, because he's fighting his own team in all of them. And he does it in the first one, he does it in Winter Soldier, and he does it in Civil War. And it's just who his team is what's different. Now, he does kind of fight his own team, and then mostly the bad guys in the first one. The second one, and I know it's Hydra and all that other stuff, but it symbolizes his own team. And it's like it comes closer to home each time. So it's like the time you get to Civil War, it's literally his own team. These aren't agents or double agents or anything. There's people with difference of opinion, really. And
that basically is what it came down to in the end.
Right. And so, Ant-Man I haven't seen, have no desire. Not going to see Spider-Man. I don't even care. I don't care if they said it was the best Spider-Man ever made, and it wasn't that Tom Holland, the moron playing him. Because there's so many of these superhero movies, the periphery movies become less and less interesting to me. And we got another Thor movie coming out, which it's like, where has he been? But maybe he gets kidnapped or something. I don't know. And I don't really give a crap. And we got Loki in it again, although apparently Loki's going to fight with Thor. What I think it happens in this movie is he actually becomes the God of Thunder. It's not just the hammer. He actually is the God of Thunder by the end of it. He doesn't need the hammer. Kind of like what happens in Wonder Woman, despite what happens in Batman versus Superman, and what we've seen in the Justice League. She, in her movie, she defeats Ares, even though he's destroyed her sword and she's lost her shield. So, and so she's like, this is why Nick called her the Batman of Paris. He jumps off a tall building at the end of it. She has her gauntlets, but she doesn't have anything else. Which in the show back in the 70s, I don't remember Linda Hamilton ever having a sword or a shield. So why she has it in Batman versus Superman, and then something that's supposed to happen like a couple weeks later after that movie, she doesn't. I don't know. But continuity is not
continuity their issue.
It's the whole thing. But no one cares. People don't see that. This is the same. Well, whatever. But the fatigue. Here's what I see, and I know I'm rambling a lot.
That's fine.
The fatigue, I think, so that's one camp where it's a combination of people like me who are tired, but they just want to see the end. I've invested all this time, please end it, Marvel. And so you have people on the one end there, and that same group also people where they are starting to get fatigued, right? They see the Black Panther and they really don't care about the truth. We don't need another origin story. We don't need, this stuff. And they're starting to slide into that fatigue. And then I think that's like 40% of the people. And then the other 40% of the people are the ones who think each new movie is the best thing since sliced bread. They're part of the group think. They're fully blue-pilled. They can't see left, up, down, left, or right. They don't see the similarities in any of the movies. Every movie is distinct. Every movie is great. Every movie is wondrous, and it doesn't matter if they're Marvel fans or Star Wars fans or whatever. They can't get enough. They want a blockbuster movie every single month. I guess these people are made of money or their parents are paying for everything. I haven't figured that out. But I think that group is this group that's getting smaller. And I think it's one of these geometric progressions. They're starting to get smaller, and they're starting to more rapidly get smaller. And by the time we get to mid of next year, I think that group's going to be 15%. And because I really think Hollywood's got a bubble going. I cannot believe they've had so many movies that cost so much money that are making so much money. Where's all this disposable income coming from when we're supposed to have, underemployment and unemployment is supposed to be really 20 some odd percent. And tickets are $18 a piece. It just, I know it's fewer eyeballs. When you look at how many people actually see the movies, it's less and less. But, when this busts, I don't think you're going to be able to make a superhero movie for 10 years. The current generation is going to have to flush out and the new one come in that wants their own superhero movie. And that's part of it, too. That's part of what Jeff talks about. They want to be included. They want to feel a part of it. The young generation needs their own Star Wars. They need their own superhero movies. But they're just doing it by rewriting and stealing the ones of the previous generation. There's nothing new.
The younger generation doesn't necessarily need their own Star Wars. Just pick up the DVD or ask somebody, like, for example, yourself. Like, just ask someone who has been there or who's watched the movies and be like, hey, look, what's Star Wars? Can you tell me more about it? Can you introduce me to it?
Right. Well, I think they want that experience. See,
they do.
They want that theater experience. That may actually be the ultimate nostalgia, right? Because you have a generation that, if they had tapes, they were very, very young, and most of the tapes that they are familiar with, their parents own, or an older sibling. They're used to DVDs. Now they're used to streaming everything, right? They got their phones. They can take it anywhere, and it's but they want that group experience. And despite all the memes of showing the kids out playing outside, all staring at their phones, well, they want both. They want to be in that big group and experience it while they're on their phone on Twitter chatting about it. So maybe that's maybe that's the drug. That's where what's produced in the is it endorphins? No, a dopamine is that theater experience with their friends. Can be anywhere. They may not be with their friends. They may be surrounded by people, but they're not with their friends. Their friends are in 17 different locations, and they're all on their iPhones while they're watching the movie, chatting about it.
Actually, now that you brought it up, they were talking about the streaming service thing. One thing that I don't really care so much about the fact that Disney doing, but one thing that I think it was Dion who brought it up, or Jeff. It had to be one of the two. Was a whole notion that you have people who are saying, "Oh, I'm canceling my expensive cable bill, my $100, $200 cable bill, right?" But then you're getting like all these streaming services at a minimum of like, let's say $10. And you get like 8 or 9 of them, and it's like you're basically, and then you complain about not being able to watch certain things because you don't have accessibility to it. Like you got Netflix, you got Hulu, you got Amazon Prime, and then you got something like Disney coming up, and then that's just a few. And then mind you, you have streaming services for other things. For example, like for people who are into anime, you got Crunchyroll, which I know exists. Then you have the stuff on PlayStation. I think was also mentioned in that conversation. And there's like streaming services for almost everything now. Like it's getting ridiculous. And I don't know. It's like, I think this is also part of what's contributing to the fatigue. The fact that you have all these streaming services, all this, you know what it is? I think it's more of an overload of information, because essentially anything you're accessing through a computer or anything is essentially information. Even if it's entertainment, it's still information. It's still a story. It's still words. It's still visuals. All just happens to be in a form of entertainment. And what it is that people nowadays, I think, have gotten too many streaming services. For example, like the Russian streaming service. I don't always check it out, but it has a replayability. Like they were right about that. You can watch old wrestling matches if that's what you're into, old wrestling episodes, old clips. But at the same time, it's like I have that, and then I have Netflix, and it's like between the two, which one do I watch? Which one do I what do I want to see on this thing? And then now you add Amazon Prime, and it's like now all of a sudden I have too many choices. And it like, you ever go to the supermarket? I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have this happened to you, but have you ever been to the supermarket where you see like all the different options of like, let's say like it's a can of, like let's say ice cream, right?
Right.
And you're telling yourself, okay, I'm taking one, but which one? And you see like like 6, 7, 8 different brands of ice cream. They all have vanilla, but you're talking to yourself now. You're like in your mind and even probably even vocally saying, do I go with this one? Do I go with that one? And at one point, it kind of gets like on you, like it gets on your nerves. And it's almost like at that point, you don't even bother with it anymore. You're just like, oh, fuck this. I'm out of here.
Right.
Like, you ever had that happen to you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, there's an expression, too much of a good thing. And,
Exactly.
and I found the discussion about the streaming stuff interesting because, to me, rewatchability is a personal thing. And I think it was Dion that was saying, how rewatchable wrestling was. Well, if I've seen a match that I know how it ends, to me, it's not rewatchable. But a movie I like that I know by heart can be rewatchable if I feel like actually watching it and experiencing that. So the same thing can be with wrestling, even though you know the outcome, but you want to hear the crowd, the jeering, you want to kind of feel a part of it. I think the rewatchability of a lot of the Disney stuff depends on, the kids. Now, Dion has a son who's pretty young. Dustin would probably have a bit different take on it since his kids are a little bit older. But, when my kids were little, they would watch the same video for 3 hours. Right? It's only a 22-minute, VeggieTales video or something, but they would rewind it and put it in and play it again and play it again and play it again. And then sometimes they only watch it once and they did, do something else, and then maybe they would, I remember when my son was really little, I forget exactly how old he was, 4 or 5 years old, we went and saw VeggieTales live. And at the end of it, he's yelling again. And because he wanted to see it again. He didn't understand that it was VeggieTales, but you couldn't just click rewind. And used to see this, I think, on Blue's Clues, where they would show, in a little 3 to 5 minute little something, and it wasn't. It was Teletubbies, and they would say again, and they would play it again. So
murderous trolls.
Right, but that, and my oldest daughter is almost 21, so that'll give you an idea how old they are.
Really? Wow.
Right, so that is up to the viewer, right? And the thing with these various streaming services, now Disney has a lot of content. And especially if they do all of this, I mean, Disney owns a lot of stuff. Between Disney and Sony, that's like 85% of all movies or something. I mean, it's unbelievable what those two companies control. And the thing about it is that it's up to the viewer how rewatchable something is. And for little kids, the streaming services may be interesting. But you already have on-demand and other things with either satellite or cable. I got rid of satellite DirecTV years ago. We went back to over the air, and now most of what we watch is either DVDs or from Netflix or the family video up the street, or it's streaming. We have Amazon Prime. Now, I got Amazon Prime because of free shipping and other deals because I was ordering enough stuff every year that it made sense.
Oh, it's great for produce, by the way. My mom uses it a lot, and my sister uses it to order groceries, and you get them like in the cup, like 2 hours minimal at best, sometimes even less.
Well, it depends on what services. We don't have some of that stuff around here, but
but it's going to catch up. I
Right.
think they're seeing the success in it right now. I mean, I didn't want to like deviate from the subject, but
no.
you want to talk about the behemoth. Amazon is definitely know what they're doing.
Yeah, but so I see these streaming things. So Disney, it's going to be interesting because I think there'll be a backlash if they pull their content from everywhere. But like I said, we had talked about these things before. I remember when Sony pulled Stars content from Netflix when there was a Netflix HD player for Xbox came out. And so, previously there had been one for the Wii, and you had to stick a CD in them to run it. But it had been exclusive as far as in the gaming console on an HD resolution to PlayStation. And then they came out with an Xbox. And as soon as they did that, Sony got all pissy, and they yanked their streaming content from most of it's through Stars off of Netflix. And I can't remember if they tried their own streaming service or not. To me, it's kind of like, it's all this Me Tooism. We see Apple doing, now they're doing a autonomous car, and they've done search, and or Microsoft did Bing, because Google was popular. And it's kind of like, well, if they did it, we can do it too. And so I think that's what a lot of the Disney stuff is. And some of it's just, some of it's just pure greed. If they can charge people $10 a month to watch their stuff as opposed to getting, fragments of pennies per view on Netflix through the licensing fees, then that's more profit for them. And that's where we are these days. Companies are, even Apple's in it profit. I know Nick kind of ranted about this, and I'm not exactly an Apple fanboy. I mean, yes, I have Apple products and I run Macs, but I'm done with them. I mean, their newer iMac Pros look really nice, but they're not cheap. And the Apple tax for years, the Apple tax was a myth. It was people who didn't understand what they were comparing, and they would look at, especially in the laptop business, they would look at specs only, not the construction. And if you wanted a unibody Windows machine, usually a Sony Vaio, you're going to pay the same price as an Apple, because you have this heavy all aluminum case that's very thin, but it's very strong. Or if you're going to do like a Toshiba Toughbook or something where you can literally throw the thing down the street, and that's what the military uses. Well, guess what, Skippy? Those things are $4,000 or $5,000 a piece. Right? You can get these things covered in Kevlar. It's just insane what you can get. Now the specs is the same as that $1,200 Dell laptop that's going to fall apart if you breathe on it. But and for years, Intel had on the desktop and the laptop range, there were processors that would come out, and they'd be exclusive on the Mac for sometimes as long as 6 months before you could buy them on any Windows machine. So the Apple tax used to not be a real thing, but now it is a very real thing. And now they've also gone off into the similar to Google, they're going off into the social justice warrior politics of, the politics of personal destruction, really. And I'm like, I don't care what people do with their money, but I'm not going to necessarily give my money to a company if I don't agree with what they're doing with their profits. Just take those profits and give your shareholders something, and dive the other stuff back into research and development. You don't have to make it a social cause somewhere. If you want to do that with your part of the paycheck, that's different, but not with the company funds. And
no, it's usually stuff like dumb choices like that usually end up having like some negative repercussions, and then profits getting affected.
Because people will stop saying, I don't agree, right? And, if there's like three, basically it's this. If Adobe came out with Adobe Creative Cloud available for Linux, I would literally build one tomorrow. I would take my credit card, I would go down to Micro Center, and I would build a complete system to run Linux on it, because Windows is horrid. And but I cannot justify spending $3,500 on an iMac Pro that's really about a $2,400 computer. Because there are even things like the 5K screen, which is still, you can get an iMac 5K with decent specs, and it's like $200 more than what Dell sells that the 5K monitor for. Part of it, it's 27-inch, but part of it's because no one's buying the 5K. No one needs that kind of resolution, and its refresh rate is too slow for games. And I think that's why it doesn't sell well, and so the price hasn't really come down. But eventually we'll have 4K resolution with 200 or faster megahertz refresh rates, and you will see those prices drop because gamers will want 12 of them. And, with these displays, some of the gamers that have, 6 displays, it's insane. But
I mean, that is going to be the future eventually.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was watching Nikon has a new camera out that will do 8K video. It's a 45 megapixel full frame SLR. It does 4K and also does 8K. I think I want to say 25 frames per second, but I'm not sure. Now, to get that, you have to have some kind of memory that I've never heard of. It looks like an SD card, but it has extra connections, and it's in some insane rate. Because if you think of an 8K, if you're capturing 30 frames per second, let's say, just to keep the numbers, that's a lot of data that you're shoving into the card. And now, granted, it's a $3,300 camera, okay,
Shit.
but that camera body is. And it's in that prosumer line. It's not considered a pro camera because it's got, I think it's the 850. But I was watching an unveiling video with Chelsea and Tony yesterday, and yeah, I would love that. I mean, that camera, it captures unbelievable details, but you're starting to get that into the high end. The mid range, you're starting to get 4K cameras. So that means over the next couple of years that, let's say, mid-level Nikon is going to have 4K, right? It's going to be the camera that's in that, usually around $1,000. Although they've gone up slightly. My D80 was, I think, $900 some odd dollars. My D7000 was like $1,100 and something, and then its predecessor, the next one was like $1,200. So it's probably going to be from $1,000 to $1,300. That thing's going to have 4K. It's going to have dual cards. It's going to have wireless, all this stuff on it, maybe even GPS, And then 3 years from that, so within 5 years, that $1,200 camera is going to be 8K video. Probably some ridiculous amount of megapixels too. And so that stuff's going to come down, and you're going to have, when you're editing an 8K video, a regular, even I don't care if it's super VGA, basically you're going to need a minimum of 4K display, maybe even bigger. And, to me, it's just unbelievable. When I've seen 4K televisions, and it's like, it's almost hyper real, I can't imagine what 8K is going to be like. But I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about anymore. But that means I've been talking for way too long.
It's interesting to hear these things. I mean, I never knew, like, I'm like only recently started hearing about like 4K and how big of a deal it is, and now I'm hearing the things about like 5 and 8K. Like, shit.
Yeah.
Technology's I think that's probably a problem also. It's not just affecting, like, possibly causing fatigue in us, but also what's affecting entertainment in general is just that technology is expanding way too fast. Like, it's progressing way too fast for us to even comprehend.
Well, I don't know if it's going any faster than it's done before, but what we get in our ability to absorb it, I think, is what's going slower.
Okay,
to me, I don't think technology's going any faster.
Yeah.
It's just that when you double, let's say, okay, so let's go back to when I was first in the computer. So in 1982, when I first started programming, I had to think of what year it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw some computers in the late 70s that were, just raster graphics and very, very simplistic. But in 8th grade in 1982 was when I was introduced to the Apple II. It may have been an Apple II Plus. I don't know. It's hooked to a television. So let's just say it was a 2 Plus because that was a very popular until the 2E came out. So the 2 Plus was 48K of memory. And we're going to get real nerd here, so everybody hold on to your hats and go look on Wikipedia, anything you don't understand. So the Motorola 6502 and the CMOS versions are 8-bit computers with a 16-bit memory address bus. So what that means is they deal with everything in single characters at a time, and they can access 64K of memory. Okay? So 64K is 64 times, the K is 1024, so it's 64 times 1024 characters, if you will, of memory space. And by the time I graduate high school in 1986, The Atari has come out with a full 32-bit machine, I believe. Yeah. The 386 is right around the corner from Intel. But most of what you have is 16-bit, so IBMs and Macintoshes. The Apple IIe is still around. They sold the Apple IIe until 1992, so it stayed around a long time. It went from 83 to 92. The Commodore 64 is long gone. That's again 6502. The 128 is around. Apple is trying to get their 2GS out, but it's too late. But your run-of-the-mill IBM compatible PC-AT is a 286. It's 16-bit internal register, so it's twice as wide as what it can look at once, and 24 bits of memory address. So that means 16 megabytes of memory are usable. So over the course of 4 years, essentially, we have what? We went from 16K to 64K to 16 megs, whatever difference in change that is. And but most people were still running the 8086, which could only see 1 meg of RAM. So it had the same 16-bit address space and 1 meg of RAM it could do. And we're all running DOS, right? This is no Windows. The Mac OS is a 16-bit platform as well. Although 32-bit machines are around the corner, but we don't run true 32-bit until, for the general public, not really until Windows 95. Okay? So that's another 9 years, 9 years before we're running 32-bit. But we quickly, the 64K limit with memory was hit very quickly. The 1 meg was hit very quickly, and you got all these different ways in the 80s to get over that 1 meg limit. Extended memory, expanded memory, you had all kinds of high loaders. You had this DOS stuff. Sometimes you had to have device drivers loaded in a specific order to get everything to work right. Blah, blah, blah. And there were clones of DOS and all this other stuff, and Unix was still around. Let's not get into too many details. But we were very quickly absorbing those, hitting those limitations very, very quickly. We get to 32-bit. So 32-bit, I think, if I remember correctly, the 386 came out in 1987. But we really didn't run 32-bit stuff until Windows 95. Now, Windows 95 did sit on top of DOS, but you started to get 32-bit extensions. You'd actually get it a little bit earlier, but let's just say 95 for a nice benchmark number. Okay. Well, that gives us 3.2 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, from the 16. So the 286 could do 16 megs. The 386 could do 3.2 gig. As I know somebody's going to argue about that, forget it. We'll just do round numbers, 3.2 gig. Well, we don't hit that limit. I remember the first time I bought a memory module pack that was 1 gigabyte of memory. It was 4 SIMs. 1 gigabyte single DIMMs, because they were double. I still have some stuff that I bought, about 2 gigs of RAM. It was 2 sticks. Well, each stick was a gig. It was $900. Okay, and this was probably 2005 or 6. It was when we lived in this house. Okay, I still have it in my drawer. I showed it to my daughter a couple months ago because I got it at Micro Center where she now works, and she couldn't believe the price for 2 gigs. Okay. Well, we didn't go 64-bit till when? 2009, 10 maybe?
Probably.
Somewhere around there is when I started seeing 64-bit Windows XP machines being sold at Sam's Club. So that told me 64-bit's coming, right? But you still had a 32-bit, 64-bit. It really, in general, Vista started, it was supposed to, but really, for the general public, Windows 7 is where 64-bit only became the thing. There is a 32-bit version of Windows 7, but it's more for embedded systems. So, but Windows 7 is only the last several years, like 2014 or something like that. So it took us longer to get from the 3.2 gig, to get to the 3.2 gig limit of 32-bit. was we technically had it starting in 1987, not until June, but it's another 8 years before it's in general use, and then it's another 13 years at least until that limit is hit by mom and pop, right? And they have to get a machine now that has, 4 gigs of RAM or something. I mean, go look at what an $800 computer has now. It's probably something crazy like 16 gigs or something. But what I'm saying is that the technology keeps moving on, I think at more or less the same pace, but because of those huge jumps, I mean, our ability to absorb the technology is slowing down. Mm-hmm. So when we had the digital cameras, and we had, the digital cameras have been in the 70s. And most of the time they were used by NASA on their space probe, their Voyager and all that crap. Because they don't have a way to develop film, and you can't take it out. You send Voyager to, send a spacecraft to Venus, you can't do a film. So you have to do some kind of CCD. So, but think of the first cameras, man. Think of the first cell phone cameras. It was a big deal when you could have a cell phone that was VGA graphics, 640 by 480. I don't even know if it is a megapixel. And then we start getting like the D70, for instance, from Nikon. I think it was under 6 megapixel. And then you got 6, and then we had 10, and then we had 15, and you got cell phones now that are 30, 40 megapixel cameras. Just think about that. That's a huge file, but it's a cell phone, right? Yeah. It's not a dedicated $3,000 camera. It's an $800 cell phone, right? So, Apple had them a couple of years ago. They had, when they came out with some of the new iPad 2 or 3, whichever one it was. Where it's in Columbus here, where they have these nice big buildings with nothing obstructing your view, and it's this huge image that's blown up to 5 stories, and it says taken with an iPad. And there's no drop in resolution. It's unbelievable how clear it is, blown up that large. It's a freaking iPad. So, but our ability to then utilize that technology to its fullest, I don't think we get there, and then the new iPad comes out and it has twice the resolution. Right?
Yep.
So it may be a bit of a rant here, but I think that's part of it. It's like, to me, it doesn't feel like the technology is going any faster. It's getting applied in more ways. It's starting to invade everything, like the automated car and all that kind of stuff. But it is, I think, our ability. So I'm looking at the Nikon D850. It has 4K. Okay, so granted, it's a $3,200 camera, full frame, digital SLR, 32 millimeter, 45.7 megapixel, 4K Ultra HD recording, up to 120 frames per second. So think about that. So that is basically 4 times faster than your typical movie. Movies are usually 30 frames per second. So, and that is not a RED camera like a few years ago. These $30,000, $40,000 cameras that only did video, and they were 150 pounds. This is a fit in your hand, probably weighs, I don't even know if this thing, probably less than a pound, $3,300 camera. So how in the world, so what does that $50,000 video camera look like now? I don't know. That's not a semi-rhetorical question. So that's what I'm saying. Whatever the specs are on that camera, within a few years, that's going to be a $3,000 prosumer camera, and a few years later, it'll be a $1,200 consumer camera. And who in the world taking pictures of a birthday party or videos of, like my videos of my beer reviews, I don't need 4K freaking video.
Oh, of course. Like, we don't even need 4K for this thing.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So when it gets to that consumer grade, and these ridiculous specifications. What in the world? They're not doing anything with it. I mean, those cell phones cameras that are 30 and 40 megapixel, I can guarantee you they're compressing the crap out of it, because you would take about 7 pictures and run out of memory. But
It's almost kind of like, sorry if I cut you off,
no,
but
go
it's
ahead.
kind of
No,
like
I need to be cut off. I've been rambling too much.
no. I mean, it was because again, the whole educational experience, like you're basically giving us a good history of like technology expanding, like making your point of how it's really not so much that it's expanding rapidly, rather it is us. Like again, I could also see it that way too. That maybe it's not so much the technology, but rather the human mind is just not. It's getting slower, and that might also be again part of the whole like they say it's the zombie generation now because we're always on our cell phones, and it's like it's kind of dumbed us down a lot. Like we become so dependent on technology to the point that now we can't even have rational thought or expression or even debate as a part of it. If you think about it, really, it's kind of like correlation. I can't say causation, but correlation at least.
Right.
And one of the things that I find also fascinating about this whole topic is like you're bringing up this whole, you have the technology, but no one's using it. I mean, look at how far we've got with video games. And if anything, you have all this technology built about, like, look at all these things that your video game consoles can do. But the reality is, how many people actually use all these features?
Right. Right. Very few.
I don't use all these features. I don't even bother with them because at some point it's like, I'm just here to, if I buy the console, it's to play the fucking damn game.
Right. Well, it becomes overwhelming, right? And this kind of gets to your other point. You know, if I go to an ice cream store, I'm going to kind of flip it around here. And it's, it's a mom and pop thing, and they got 9 flavors. How long does it take me to make my mind up what I want? But if I go on was it Baskin Robbins? Was that 31 flavors?
Yeah, I think it's Baskin Robbins, yeah.
Okay. Now it takes me a little longer. Now, if I go to Joe's Super Duper Ice Cream Shop, that prides itself in their 195 flavors of ice cream, I may not even be able to process that.
Yeah,
right?
You're definitely correct about that.
I mean, I know what I feel. There's a bar, I think it's called the Yard House. It's a place down on the river. And they have 100 beer taps. All of it craft beer. You're not going to find, as far as I don't believe that, and maybe they have 4 taps that are like your Miller Lite, Bud Light garbage. And then they have an unbelievable selection. I've been there 3 times. I've never ordered a beer in less than 10 minutes. Never.
Wow.
Because it's too many choices. Because it's like, well, what do I want? Well, maybe I want an IPA. Well, they have 30 of them. Right? And I'm talking, on draft and bottles and cans and all the other stuff. And it's good and it's bad. I like having the choice, but yeah, it can be completely paralyzing when you have too many options. Now, I did flip over the specs. I did misread that. It's 30 frames per second at full 4K. But what that is slow motion to 100. It will do 100 frames per second in full HD mode, and 120 frames per second. Because that's how you can do slow mo. You do a high rate, high frame rate, and then you play it back at regular rate, and so it'll be 1/4 speed if you do 120 frames per second. But still, it's not a $30,000 video camera. And I think that we end up with a lot of these options, and we end up with too many choices. And I think, to me, this is why the fatigue for me, why I'm not going to every movie. It's not that I don't like Ant-Man. I've never heard of Ant-Man. But if I wasn't getting 4 or more Marvel movies a year, maybe I'd go see it. The Black Panther movie, I don't know if I give a crap. I get enough of the Black Panther in the movies he's been in, and he's kind of the leader of, he's helping, he helps, is it Iron Man or Captain America? I can't even remember which side he helps. I think it's Iron Man. But, he brings those guys to his place in the end of Civil War. And so he's kind of coming out as a leader of one of the factions, or a provider of one of the factions. And so I would fully expect to see him in Infinity War. He plays a little bit bigger role, Now, I wouldn't say as the lead. He's not going to replace Iron Man or Captain America, but he's definitely going to should be well involved. And I feel I'm going to get enough of that character and know enough about the person, the prince, whatever his name is, that the standalone movie I don't think I need. I didn't need Rogue One. Knowing that the rebels stole some stuff, I mean, I can use my imagination from those two sentences. They stole the plans. They somehow got them to Princess Leia, and somehow in that Vader not only figured out where they were, to whom they were sending them, but figured out where she was going. Now, he didn't know her mission, because I don't, unless it's like Star Trek and they can hunt each other down in hyperspace, we never see that in Star Wars. And so somehow he knew that she was headed to Tatooine. She comes out of hyperspace. He comes right out of hyperspace right behind her in his ship, and they start the fighting. And that's what we see in the beginning of A New Hope. I don't need any more than that.
It almost sounds like, when you think about it, like the way you're describing it, again, me as the outsider looking in, it seems to me like, if anything, Revenge of the Sith was more, I won't say important, but I guess more necessary in terms of the storytelling than Rogue One was.
Yeah.
Like, Rogue One almost sounds like it didn't need, it could have not been made, and it would have made no difference. Whereas Revenge of the Sith being made kind of sheds light on things and actually even shows us like the most important thing, like the downfall of the Jedi, basically kicking off the event that would later be A New Hope and the original trilogy.
Right.
It even goes with the title, if you think about it, of Return of the Jedi at the end. Because it's like, okay, well, why is it titled Return of the Jedi? And now you have a movie much later that comes out and shows you because it was a downfall of it.
Right.
So it feels more necessary. Now looking at it, it almost makes me think, I could basically not watch Rogue One, and I won't be missing anything really of importance.
Right. Well, I think Rogue One is not only an unnecessary movie, it's the wrong movie. There's this whole concept that was a plot hole in A New Hope, that the shield, the torpedo run into the exhaust port. To me, it's people who don't understand storytelling think that's a plot hole. And again, it's the younger generation, people who actually are, it's not it's people in their 20s, essentially the age of, they grew up with the prequels that hated them. They wanted to kindle the magic of the original trilogy because they weren't around. And for some reason, again, I think it gets to, maybe it's dumbed down of education, maybe it's lack of attention span, I don't know. But they don't understand the elements of storytelling. They don't tell any stories. And it's not a plot hole. It is fully explained in the first movie, New Hope, what that is for. It's an exhaust port. It is ray shielded, which means you can't just use your blasters. Plus, it goes down. I mean, you'd have to dive bomb it. So the torpedo I don't know how the torpedo curves, but they even show it in the animation, the torpedo curving, but it takes a direct hit. So it's not too dissimilar to some of the things that happen in Star Trek, where if a ship has its shields up, you can't shoot your phasers at it. But if you know their frequency, you can set the photon torpedoes, and they will go right through the shields. And we see this in some in play in the TV show, but we definitely see it in the Next Generation movies, because that's how, I think it's Generations actually, where that's how the Klingons, I forget their names, the two sisters, shoot through the shields and they hit the Enterprise and they get the frequency. So to me, it's a similar concept. These proton torpedoes, they're going to go through the shield. However, they're extremely difficult target to hit. Less than 2 meters, so we're saying less than 6 feet. It's not a big target. They're going in at full speed. I don't know how fast they're going, but I think somewhere in there they say Mach 2 or something like that. So let's just use that as an example. So if you're traveling 1,400 miles an hour, coming at a target that's less than 6 feet across, how difficult is that shot, right? Where's the plot hole that says this is they act like this is some gaping wound in the side of the Death Star that the Empire just doesn't see? No, it's well guarded with lots of guns. It's ray shielded. It's very difficult to hit. It's probably one of these things where some engineer, that's why it has that. It's not wide open. It's not just an easy. It's not something like in Spaceballs where they just go to the self-destruct button that's literally says self-destruct on it, right? It's not
that's a joke.
right.
That's the joke.
But
oh my god, talk about a movie that might go over people's heads if they were to watch it these days.
Yeah, absolutely go over their heads. But even that, they had to fly through. They had to get in the inner ear. They, it wasn't easy for them to do, and then they had the duel at the end there. But it's not a freaking plot hole. So to have this movie and to come up with this convoluted nonsense that Jen Urso's father, whose name I don't know, Galen Urso, I think is his name, puts it in on purpose. Yeah, I think that's his name. I don't even know.
Like gay is in the name.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Galen. It doesn't matter. So,
fair enough.
But it's it's supposed to be covering up this plot hole. It's like, no, my God, what he did is now a plot hole, because how does that get through? How does it just anyway? But yeah, I could have done with right. I could have done without the prequels because I had a notion of how things, but to see the downfall, to see the hubris of the Jedi, because they've been unchallenged for 1,000 years. I still say I would rather have Anakin fall from a much higher height than he does. Instead of being this poor slave, he should have been someone of high society, a big part of the Republic, who's easily swayed by the guy who eventually becomes by Palpatine, because he's full of himself. And we kind of see that in the second one, where he's talking about how frustrated it is because the Jedi won't let him do stuff, and he has more power, he's better at stuff. I think that's really the dynamic that should have been in the first one. We should not have seen him as a kid. We should have seen him about the same age as Luke, but instead of being this whiny, unsure person that comes to know, he should have been full of himself, cocky, arrogant, the star athlete, and so he has a much higher height. And basically, his downfall is because of the Jedi, being a part of him, and the Jedi too. And so you have this big fall from grace in the second one. The third one is just a bloodbath. But I think what you need is to have him marry. Their relationship needs to start a little bit sooner. They get married in the second one. We find out at maybe at the end of the second one or beginning of the third one that she's pregnant and hiding. Maybe they have a confrontation similar to what we see in the third one, and he chokes her and gets frustrated and essentially leads to her death. I don't know about that, but
I don't know. Maybe just backhand and slapping her, and she falls off a tall building or something.
Something that because I always got the impression. Right. Well, I always got the impression from the original movies that he didn't know she was pregnant, right? And now, granted, I know Lucas changed his mind and made Darth Vader his father, and originally he wasn't going to be. But part of this was Anakin, what may or may not have been alive. But that's a fine point we can argue. But I think they should have built that up a lot more than he did. You don't have this echoing, because it really is. He was trying to repeat the beats of this first movie too much. And it's like, repeat the beats, but with a different story, and have him be this arrogant, stuck up, your stereotypical rich prep kid, right? Who, yes, they study hard, but they're a little bit smarter than average, a little bit better athlete than average. They have no real struggles. And, I encountered these people in high school, and I wanted to smack them around then. It's just like, and have that fall from grace so that his sacrifice in Return of the Jedi is extremely significant. When he, basically sacrificed himself to save his son, it becomes it has a bigger weight to it than what we get with this whiny, nonsense. So anyway, I said I didn't want to talk about Star Wars anymore.
I know you said you didn't want to, but after a while I was kind of intrigued, and I even kind of found myself wanting to pitch something here in between there. I'm like, that actually could have made for a much better movie. And you talking about him having kind of this rhyme sequence with the originals. Now you have someone who blatantly essentially did that, and it not only did it with the sequence and the plot, but also the entire freaking story, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, it's, you know, I've said this a zillion times. I only saw the first prequel, and at some point I'm going to rewatch all three of them. I had them in my Netflix queue, and they got close to up, and I was like, I can't do it, because I don't. Maybe I'm being too much of a stickler here, but then I only saw the first one in theaters, and it was like, I don't like where George is going with this. I knew what he was doing within the first 20 minutes, and I'm like, this is dumb. And then to have him create C-3PO, it just felt too. It's like when Stargate SG-1 looked like it was going to be canceled or going to close, and then they brought Ben Broder in, and they were literally putting the band back together. I don't know how many times he said he was putting the band back together, and that's how I felt with the Phantom Menace. It's like we're trying too hard to make all these coincidences happen. Yes, I would like to see C-3PO and R2-D2, but C-3PO should be like fresh out of the factory. He should not be created by Anakin. They fawn over R2-D2 like he's, ridiculously, and in some way, and I don't know why, but I'm sure George had his reasons, and I'm sure they're stupid. But R2 should have started to show some of the daring and the bravery that we see in A New Hope, and that we actually see throughout the first trilogy. He should have started to show that, not have this glorious thing where he saves them and then they're all fawning over him like he's the greatest droid that ever was created. It should have been something, maybe an accident, maybe something that short circuits, or something where his programming all of a sudden gets slightly altered and he becomes a little bit more brave, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. So by the time we see the third one, we're not so surprised, though. In A New Hope, he just goes off wandering by himself, right? He Luke says where Obi-Wan Kenobi might be. It might be Ben over on the Dune Sea. Somehow R2 knows where that is, and he just takes off. And somehow, doesn't get captured by the Jawas again, like he does in the beginning. But even there, right? C-3PO is like, we're going this way, but R2 almost like he knows where he's going. Nope, I'm going this way, all by himself. And he gets captured, but it doesn't preclude him from doing it again after he gets more information from Luke, and he just takes off, right? They don't capture him till the next day, so he was out all by himself, and no scavengers found him or nothing, no wild animals or anything like that. So, but that's something you could build over 3 movies. It doesn't have to be the first 5 minutes we see the droid, he saves the entire ship, and everybody's like, oh my god, R2, you've never seen such a droid. But again, it's because Luke says in the first movie, I've never seen such a devotion to a droid before. So we get a very similar line from the captain of Padme's ship. So anyway, it's too echoey, and poetry is not easy to write. People think it is.
Maybe we could do this some other time.
Good poetry is not easy to write. No, so and we're getting past 2 hours, right, total here, and my voice is going. So let's talk about Toys R Us.
Might as well.
So Toys R Us is rumored that they may file for Chapter 11 restructuring. No, they've hired a law firm who specializes in Chapter 11 restructuring. They are $400 million in debt, and apparently it's owed soon. It was. So why? Why is it? What's all their debt on?
Well, the general consensus as to, their downfall, I guess you can call it, because essentially this is the beginning. This is usually the beginning of the end. And if something doesn't turn around for them immediately, it's basically going to be it. Again, Toys R Us. I mean, there are other stores, like other retailers that sell toys and everything, but in terms of like a large corporation, Toys R Us is really the biggest one. And it's been out there for a long time. They eventually acquired KB Toys, ran them out of business, and essentially had the whole market on the toy exclusivity as a toy retailer. You still had things like Kmart, Sears, Target, Walmart. They sell toys too, but not to the degree that Toys R Us does. So the consensus is that apparently things like Amazon and online shopping, because of the way that consumerism is changing and how people are ordering their stuff online as opposed to going to in stores, is basically what's hurting Toys R Us. Amazon being one of them, the other websites basically, and things like price matching as well. Like I don't know about you, but when I go to Toys R Us sometimes, their stuff can be pretty pricey. And sometimes, like let's say you go to Walmart or Target, you may find the same product sometimes a little bit less. I mean, it maybe $1 less or something. You think it doesn't matter, but if I think Toys R Us does. I believe they did price matching at one point. I don't know if they still do. But stuff like that also, it's basically kind of like what happened with Kmart. In a sense, times were changing, they didn't know how to adapt, and that's essentially what the belief is. Like that's what people think is causing this whole downfall right now. But I think there might be a little bit more to it too.
Yeah, I'm reading an article on Yahoo Finance, and we're just skimming through, and apparently they were bought in 2005 by basically a private equity firm for $6.6 billion. In 2010, they tried to take it public, but because of the faltering business model. See, I think a lot of this is also they're a victim of their own business model. So it's not just Amazon, it's Walmart, and it's other like what we have around here, like Meijer. It's part of what this article mentions is your general merchandising. So if I'm running let's say a Super Walmart, or Meijer is like very similar to Super Walmart, where there's a section that's got your typical department store like a Target with clothing and crap like that, but also has grocery. So if I have other things that'll help me get that that money back, I might loss lead with toys. And that's part of what they're talking about is this competition. It's not just online. There are retailers that are undercutting them, and they may do price matching or something like that. I mean, that I think is part of why Circuit City went under. Is that price match was great when everybody was more expensive, but then when someone else came along and had similar of the same products for less because they either were larger or they lost lead with it constantly, that started to make them suffer. And the thing about this is, a lot of it is corporations that get too large or get too stuck in their business model. Let's just say it that way. They can't adapt to what the change is. And I don't know how Toys R Us has been run. This article doesn't go into a lot of details, but they do mention Walmart as being one of the biggest problems. Amazon as well, where they've slashed prices because they can, and they can make it up somewhere else if it's a loss leader. Amazon can slash prices because they warehouse just like everybody else does, but they don't have to deliver it to a store. Right? When it leaves their warehouse, I'm paying for it to get to me, right? Or whoever is buying for it, right? As opposed to
vendor, essentially.
Right. As opposed to Walmart or Toys R Us or anybody else where they've got a warehouse, then I got to put it on a truck that they're paying for to get it to the store that they're paying for. To have an employee who's going to ignore me that they're paying for. So.
Oh, tell me about it. I've had a few of those incidents.
Right. So it's not necessarily that they mark it up because they're money, greedy money bagging scum. That toy has moved several more times, and they've had to pick up the bill, and so they're going to pass that cost on to you as the customer. So it's apparently the debt matures in 2018, and that's part of why they're looking at some stuff now in the first quarter. So we're talking January, February, March time frame. So what is that, 6 months or so? I hope that they can restructure, but most companies, when you start to restructure with Chapter 11, it's extremely rare that, at least that I know of, and granted I'm not a financial wizard, that these companies come out healthy enough to continue. And they may for a while, if they can sell off the parts that are causing the problem, but when it's their base business model causing the problem, I don't see a long-term solution here. It might break up into smaller regional toy stores that survive for a while, but without a drastic change in business models, they're pretty much gone. It may take a while. Like look at Sears and Kmart. They made mistakes in the mid '90s, and they're just now almost out of business. There were stupid things that they both did in the mid '90s that took 15 years to really catch up to them. And by the time it did, it was too late. The momentum was moving away from them, and that's why they're pretty much gone.
No kidding. I mean, at this point, I go to my local Kmart, and I remember a time when there was business there. Like there were people, like it was packed on a Friday, Saturday, not so much on the weekdays, but you would have some business still, like a sizable, respectable amount, right? Like I go to the now, like I like go buy my action figures, I collect them, wrestling figures and whatnot, or occasionally I buy something for the pet that I may need nearby, and it's like one, the prices are not really convenient for me to want to go there and return. Two is that, like the level of ambiance is just like they just stopped caring, so they don't even bother to update even their own store layout, and it kind of gives you a sense like, I don't feel like shopping here. And you have, like, for example, like when talking about my pets, you have Petco, which now essentially has like all these products that you can need for your pet, all these services, stuff that obviously Kmart doesn't have, neither does Sears. So it's like, I can go here instead. Prices are convenient or about the same, but there are options. So, hey, maybe I go something a little more generic that's a convenient price or whatever the case may be. Whereas Kmart is like, their products is more limited because, it's a little bit of everything. So it's kind of like essentially, yeah, and they too made those mistakes, and now they're realizing it. A lot of it was because they didn't want to change their business practice. Okay, there was actually a very good video about it. I'll send it to you. Let me see if I'll find in the links. I'll send you the link. They basically said the whole downfall of Kmart, and he has I'll figure it out what the channel is. I'll send it to you, and if I find it, I'll put it on in the comments section so that anybody else who's interested can follow up on this and understand, basically what's the rise of all these large corporations. They think they're too big, that they're untouchable. Toys R Us is the prime example. They're not changing their business models, not realizing that, yeah, the store, you can pack those things in stores and whatnot, but if you're not bringing people to the stores because they'd rather be purchasing online, then update your online inventory as well. The online inventory sometimes really sucks. Like, I don't find it's not updated like it is in stores. Just to give you an example, like with the wrestling figures that I buy, I sometimes have to go in store just to see if there's a new release because they didn't bother to put it on the website. And this is a website that is like, you can access internationally. So what's their problem? Why can't you update it like that?
Yeah. Well, I watched the video today. I was talking about Kmart, and that was even one of the comments the guy made is even when they made a website, they spent a lot of money on a piece of crap website. Now, this guy actually used that as his lead into an ad for Squarespace as one of his sponsors, which was pretty clever. But but yeah, exactly right. So I remember trying to go to Walmart.com and couldn't find crap, and I still hate their website. I might use it to find, and Myers the same way. It's like they have a website, but only to use it to try and get you in the store. It doesn't really help. I'm like, no. I like, granted, Sears is gone pretty much now, but there was a time when you could order from Sears, and you could either ship it to your home, or you could have it sent to a local store and then go pick it up. And so they would let you know when it was there. And I think it was cheaper to do that, but I'm not positive. But if you lived out in the middle of nowhere and you didn't feel like driving 75 miles to your local Sears, you ordered online, you ordered in the catalog, and then it came. And that's part of why Sears really is now they got rid of their catalog back in the 90s. And again, this was one of those things that was the early 90s. They had a new CEO who got rid of the catalog. It's like, that is the dumbest thing you've ever done. But again, that was a mistake that didn't catch up to them for a long time. Because what they should have done is converted it into an online catalog, but they didn't. They just canceled it. I mean, the Sears Roebuck catalog was known for decades, was the mail order catalog. I mean, it was the gold standard to which everything else was measured, and they canceled it. And they put everything back in the store, right at a time when the web, as we know it, was right around the corner. And it was, about to spring onto the consciousness of people. and they were going backwards. And I can't remember how long they had the catalog, but it was a long, long time. And but you used to be, I mean, you could even order a house through Sears Roebuck at one point. And, it was a prefab, and you had to put it together. But I mean, that was, and they used to be able to buy their old catalogs. And granted, you couldn't order anything anymore, but a lot of it was Old West stuff, and so that's why I think it was probably around 100 years. I think it was long. So, yeah, good riddance. But see, I don't have a problem. Granted, I've worked for companies that went out of business. So, but if these companies have to allow to fail, so that the bad ideas can go with them, and out of the remnants will come something else. It's when we don't let companies fail when we have the problems. But it's the phoenix out of the ashes. We'll get something else. So, all right. Well, I want to try and wrap this up a little bit because I've got a lot of editing to do with all the pieces we've done, and my voice is just about gone.
Hey, I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think if anything,
we
also brought a lot of new stuff to the table.
And I talked a lot more than I normally do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was fun. Again, like I said, it's very interesting to get a different perspective on things, more than just, I mean, I'm not trying to knock the guys or anything like that, but again, like I said, not for you to take the wrong way or anything, but sometimes I like listening to the older audience, the older crowd, older people. Why? Because you've seen more. Right. You've actually experienced a lot of these things firsthand. Like most of us, it's like when you hear war stories,
right?
You want to hear it from their mouth, like, how was it for you?
Right.
What was it like? It's kind of like that.
Oh yeah. No, I understand. I mean, I was the same way when I was my mid late 20s. Especially I was working in the library, and I was the young whippersnapper, and I was 28 or 29 years old. I was the youngest one in the department. Everybody was the age I am now, right? I think the next youngest person was in their mid 30s, and then it was all 40s and 50s. And to have them, them talk about the early 70s or the late 60s, times that I didn't remember, or the 50s where I wasn't alive at all. Or early 60s where I wasn't alive. It's the same deal, right? It's just now I'm on the other side, and I can try and give a little bit bigger perspective. Because I remember 1977. I remember how big a deal Star Wars was. And then by the time we got the Jedi, it wasn't as big a deal. It was still big, but it wasn't the game changer, obviously. I mean, each movie can't be the game changer, right? A New Hope was the game changer. But I remember all of my classmates loved it, girls and boys. So this whole notion that we have to have it female-led or females can't identify with it, I think speaks more of the current of the people who believe that than reality. It's this whole thing. We got to have a black guy in it so that black people can, or black led, or it can't be identified with. And I think that's very sad. It's like you're not looking at the human struggle and identifying with that as the part of the storytelling. You're just looking at the superficial pieces. You're missing the whole point. So, not to belabor, and we could definitely talk all night, and maybe we'll talk more afterwards. Although you said you're tired, and I got a lot of editing to do. I would like to congratulate WCBS on getting 5,000 subscribers.
Damn straight.
They lost some for various reasons. I think they probably were part of that YouTube. I think a lot of them were crap accounts. But they're up over at 5,000. They got more today. Ironically, the Star Wars videos seem to bring the people in. The shorter, 7 to 15 minute videos, and that's one of the things that a lot of people say. This is why I try to keep my beer and supplement reviews to under 10 minutes. I'm not always successful, but when I can hit that 6 to 7 minute mark, I get more people watching to the end than if I ramble for half an hour. So,
I mean, we're all guilty of it, but you're right, and I've said this before. I don't know if I said it on an episode or not, but it's those short videos, and that basically, let's get to the point, let's talk about it, let's cut the crap, let's cut the fat, and let's call it what it is. And, it brings people in, and if anything, more of those videos, I think, will definitely also bring more viewers. And, who's to say that maybe they might hit that 10,000 mark by the end of the year, or at least some beginning of next year. Definitely would be a major accomplishment if they could, hopefully it works out in the end.
Right. So, listeners, if you wish to show your appreciation, we will put links in the description, as always, to incarnate-studios.com if you want to buy T-shirts or posters or other things. I do need to buy some T-shirts. We'll also put in links to Patreon.
Fucking T-shirts already.
And also to the Facebook page, where there's a lot of interactions. Right now, they're recording some things, and people are interacting with the picture that Kenny posted. So, things happen all the time, and it's really getting exciting, and as always. And also tonight, we have Mr. Kendo Slice and his BBC for the week.
Okay, so this week's BBC is a special, lovely, wonderful woman. She is a self-described curvier bombshell with extremely big boobs. I give you guys Charlotte McKinney.
Ooh.
Charlotte McKinney. Ooh.
She was in the Baywatch movie, I believe, this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she is all natural, she says. So.
Well, we'll take her word for it. But damn it ain't some lovely. Damn. I'm sorry. I'm like reading an article on her now.
Yeah, there's some interesting pictures. There might be some real nice shots. It looks like she got hacked. Some of these look like cell phone images, and the one of her wearing a literal fishnet is really nice.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one right now because I was wondering what you were getting on about. But yeah, so that's your choice for this, or your option for this week. Give you Charlotte McKinney. She is awesome, very good to look at, and they claim that she's going to like upstage Kate Upton. Maybe I don't think so. I think they should just have a strip off.
Yeah.
On camera, please.
Naturally.
And I like these, I like these women, not just because they got big boobs, but they actually have curves. They're not, a size 1 or 2 skinny looking coat racks. These women actually have some substance to them, and yet they can still be supermodels. So, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, they don't necessarily need to weigh 3,000 pounds, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep, they have nice shape, and they're curvy where they need to be.
Yep.
All right, very nice.
All right.
Thank you, sir, so much for that.
I have been your talk show host, Brain Muffin, on episode 13 of the Fancast. And with me tonight has been the one and only Liquid Metal Pro.
I'm having a long walk right now here in the street, and I see a light in the incoming direction. I wonder, is this God?
Or is it a train? All right.
Well, never mind. It passed by me. It refused to kill me.
So this has been the Fancast, and number 13, where we gather apparently every Friday usually to discuss WCBS and other things that the channel has done. And as we did tonight, we talked about our own topics for a long time. We do hope to start to, perhaps between Liquid Metal, you and I can start doing some videos. Kenny's really busy with the main channel, but we can definitely start doing some smaller videos or some other things, just to send me ideas. All right, everybody, let us know in the comments below what you think. Click that like button, and we thank you for sharing these videos. And we will see you on the Facebook, and we'll see you in the comments. And you know what? As I'm almost signing out, I forgot to do one thing, and that was to look and see if there were any comments for people to read that I need to read off. I almost signed off without doing that, and I got a dog whining at my feet, so I'm in a hurry.
Bad, Brain, bad.
Yeah, I know. Well, we had some the week before, and then I forgot to check for this week. It wasn't one of us talking to each other. Nope, there's none. So I did the ones a couple weeks ago, and we thank you for the comments. We thank you for the thumbs up, and it really helps everything. We thank you, everybody that's subscribed, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Peace.